this morning, Genesis chapter 34. The family of Abraham, Isaac, fathers of the faithful, we think of putting them up on a pedestal, right? But when we get down into the text, when we begin to look at their lives, it's not as neat and clean as we often think of from our Sunday school Bible classes when we were kids and everything was neatly painted on the walls. The story that we are going to start with this morning is one of those. So Jacob, he had to flee because he stole his brother's birthright, or his brother's blessing. He stole his brother's blessing by deceit. That which was rightfully his, which God was going to give him, he stole, and as a result, he caused additional problems in the family and had to run off and ended up marrying his cousin. He fell in love with Rachel, but because his uncle Laban was very much like himself, deceitful and scheming, he finds himself also marrying Leah. And because of the rivalry between these two sisters, we end up with Bilhah and Zephon. I'm real bad with names. These two maidservants become his wife as well. And the next thing you know, Jacob goes from wanting one wife to having four. And the amount of drama that takes place within the family just in that is absolutely ridiculous. Eventually, they do leave Laban's house, which brings with it its own drama. And, of course, Jacob re-meets his brother, and him and Esau make up. And Jacob finds himself living back in the land. And so is his brother. As they exist there, Leah has one daughter. So Jacob has 11, well, no, his wife Rachel has, let's see, where does Rachel, death of Rachel. So he's got 11 sons and one daughter. Rachel has not yet passed away, and Leah has this one daughter. Well, living back in the land, the daughter is sexually assaulted. Horrible situation. And she's assaulted by the prince of a neighboring kingdom. And he falls in love with her, and he desperately wants to marry this girl. And as a result, Jacob keeps quiet. His sons come home, and news begins to get around that their sister has been assaulted. And the king and the prince come over for coffee, and they discuss whether or not they can arrange a marriage. And the brothers act just as deceitfully as Jacob has and Laban has. The apple has not fallen far from the tree. And they have this covenant of circumcision within the family, and they say, well, if you will be circumcised, then maybe we can arrange something. And the king believes he can incorporate all of Jacob into his kingdom if he will simply submit to this practice of circumcision. So while everyone is in pain from the procedure, we have Simeon and Levi who single-handedly go into town and slaughter all these men in pain. And Jacob is not happy with his boys for this action. They have not acted out of a desire for justice. They've acted out of vengeance. And the reason that we know they've acted out of vengeance is because they don't just go and kill and demand recompense from the king or from this prince. They demand everyone suffer. And Jacob is very frustrated with them and says, you're going to make us all a stench in the nose of everybody around us. You've done a tremendous harm politically to us, and you have murdered this whole group of people just because of the misactions of one person. It seems to be, well, it's a tragic story for one. You don't have Jacob defending his daughter. You have her brothers going beyond justice and seeking vengeance. So it's just a tragedy all the way around. And one of the questions I think that would come up is why? Why are we told this? Why is this story explained? Everything we're looking at right now is leading to Genesis chapter 49 and 50. In Genesis chapter 49 and 50, we have Jacob leaning on his staff, Israel leaning on his staff and blessing his 12 sons. And that blessing is prophetic. And these stories that we're looking at right now are explaining why the blessings are the way that they are. They're explaining why the tribes are going to be divided up in the way in which they're going to be divided. We often think of Jacob having 12 sons and those 12 sons becoming 12 tribes, but it's not quite that simple. I was talking with Arnold the other day, and he was looking back at my handout from last week, and I have Jacob and the 4 wives, and then the 12 sons, and then the daughter and Joseph's sons in a family tree. And I have some color codes there, and he was pointing out it's not as clear as I would like it to be. It needs a lot of reforming in order to get it more clear. But there's a lot of things that are at play within this family tree, because you have Jacob, and who's going to be the heir, the firstborn, the son of blessing out of the family. Right? So that's one of the questions that's at play. Well, we see here that Simeon loses his position in the family because of this action. It is because of his vengeful action against this neighboring kingdom for the raping of his sister that he loses his position as second-born son. We also have a story about Reuben, the firstborn son, in this same section. Reuben goes and has intercourse with his stepmom, of all people, with Bilhah, and because of that, his brother or his father will cut him off. You violated my wife. You had intercourse with your stepmom. What were you thinking? Right? So the drama within the family is intense. Levi, who also participates in this act of vengeance, is going to lose his position as tribal leader, but he's going to be a tribe within a tribe, because the tribe of Levi becomes the priestly tribe. Right? So there's all sorts of complications that are going on here. So we've lost the tribe of Levi internally to become the priestly tribe due to this action in part. They're not going to receive a land inheritance. They will receive cities within the tribe, but they're not going to have a tribe in the same way. They're going to be embedded throughout. Simon is going to be embedded within, is going to be landlocked within Judah, is where his land is going to be. So we have these 2 sons losing their position, these 3 sons losing their position. And these stories are told to explain why these things happen. It's explaining the background of the history. And it's also a contrast in the sons. The first three sons of Leah are cut off from the family in a sense due to their sin. These are not great men. Now, we're going to look at Judah probably in 2 weeks, because the story of Judah appears in the middle of the story of Joseph. And it's important. It's there intentionally. But it's hard to get that thematically in the middle of this as we teach, right? But it's there on purpose. So Rachel dies in childbirth. Isaac, she dies in childbirth. We have her in turmoil. She names him son of my sorrows, Ben-Honi, son of my sorrows. Jacob steps in and renames him Benjamin, son of my right hand. So we have a beautiful story there. And then we have the story of Joseph. Joseph begins, we begin to look at the story of Joseph when he is quite young here. Descendants of Esau, and then we're now in 37, Genesis 37. Joseph is 17 years old. They've been living in the land a great many years. And Joseph is the oldest son of Rachel, the favorite wife. But he is 11th in line. He's the 11th son, but he is firstborn of the favorite wife. That's important, because in this family dynamic of favoritism that started all the way back with Rebekah and Isaac, we have this favoritism of Joseph. He's the favorite son of his favorite wife. He is the firstborn, but the 11th in line to receive that birthright. Maybe due to his youth, being so much younger than his brothers, due to the fact that he was this special son born of a barren wife, of his favorite wife. Jacob doesn't treat Joseph in the same way. He seems to have a better education. He seems to receive less difficult work and things like this. And his brothers take note of this. And it is culminated in this coat of many colors, this ornamental coat that sets him apart, not only in the way that he's treated, but also in his visual appearance. Now, to add insult to injury, God looks upon Joseph and blesses Joseph with a gift of visions, a gift of dreams. Now, I struggle as to knowing how young Joseph handled this situation. He was not placed in an easy spot, because on one hand he's just a 17-year-old boy, and if you haven't been around 17-year-old boys recently, there's a lot of confidence, right? And when I was in high school, the elder of the church I worked for, he had a saying: one boy a boy, two boy a half a boy, three boy no boy at all. His point being, if you get one boy out in the field working alongside you, you're going to get one boy's worth of work out of him. You get two boys together, you're going to get about half a boy's work, because they're going to be gawking at each other and fighting for position and showing off and things. You get three boys together, you're not going to get nothing done, right? So that was his point. Now, we had a pretty good thing going out in the field where we'd have a good rivalry going that would kind of encourage us along, and we all learned how to do that and to stay on task and things. Those were the tasks that we had to learn. But here is Joseph, right, young, full of himself, jockeying for position within the family, receiving unmerited favor because of who his mother is, things due to no fault of his own. And then he receives these visions. He receives these dreams. He first is out in the field working with his brothers. Maybe he longed for that more than he got to do that. Maybe it was just hilarious to his brothers to think that he would be out in the field working. The poor boy might have gotten a blister. And they're harvesting grain, and his stalk of grain stands upright. And all of his brothers' stalks of grain fall down, bowing down to his. And here's young 17-year-old Joseph receiving this dream, and he tells his brothers. Was he showing off? Was he simply sharing? He needed somebody to confide in. I don't know. We're not told his motivation here, but I can tell you how his brothers took it. His brothers took it as an insult, as him peacocking around. And as a result, his brothers began to resent him all the more, despite the fact that he wasn't working as much in the fields, and they had more responsibility, and he was this younger brother, and all these things that are at play. Then he receives another vision, another dream. There's 12 stars and a sun and the moon. They all bow down to him as well. This time even his father gets a little bit jaded, because he's like, now look, I understand your brother's bowing down to you. That makes total sense to Dad. But me? Absolutely not. You not that big stuff, dude. Right? So this causes a lot of problems. Now, Dad sends Joseph off later on to go check up on his brothers, which every sibling loves when younger sibling comes to be spy on behalf of mom and dad. That's just recipe for a perfectly operating family. And it is a complete shock when the brothers begin to plot the demise of their brother. No, it's perfectly understandable why there would be this kind of rivalry. They begin to talk about killing poor Joseph. But Reuben speaks up. The oldest son speaks up and says, we can't kill him. Just throw him in the well. Teach him a lesson. Now, Reuben's thought is, I'm not going to stand up against my brothers. I'm not going to lead them. But I'm going to come back around when nobody's looking. I'm going to get Joseph out of the well. I'm going to get him back to Dad safe and sound. I'm going to get some points here in the family. I'm going to keep Joseph safe. Well, the problem is Reuben, in his making himself scarce so he can do this scheme, is not present when Judah hatches a plan. What do we get if we kill Joseph? Vengeance? Blood on our hands? Nah. Over there's the Ishmaelites, right? We remember cousin, right? Ishmael, firstborn son of Abraham. Well, they are doing a slave trade. They're making their way to Egypt. They're passing through the land. They see these slave traders, their cousins, and they say, well, let's sell our brother to our cousin, and we'll get some money out of the deal. So they sell Joseph. They get him out of the well. They sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites then take Joseph to Egypt. The brothers say, okay, how do we explain our brother's absence? They take this beautiful coat, they tear it up, they slaughter an animal, they take the blood, they put it on the coat, and then they come to Dad with a story. We were out walking, we found this jacket. It kind of resembles Joseph's. Do you think this is his? And they just let Dad draw his own conclusions. Now, Reuben comes back before all that happens, finds out what the brothers have done. As they hand him his piece of silver, he says, what have you done? How can I go back to Dad now? Right? I mean, this is not good. So all the brothers are in on it. Everybody joins forces because we either hang separately or we hang together. So they all decide to hang together, and they hold together, and they go to Dad. They tell this story. He draws the conclusion that his beloved son is dead, and their dad just goes into mourning. and he really doesn't snap out of it. He really doesn't snap out of it. It's a permanent state of depression. Joseph finds himself in Egypt, a slave. Maybe the first time in his life he has had to work consistently, challengingly. And Joseph responds to the difficulties of his situation by trusting in God, giving his all to his work, and God blesses him. Joseph is sold into the house of the lead guard of Pharaoh. Now, next week I think we're going to watch a video that kind of goes through the historical aspect of what's going on here with Joseph and the Exodus and things. So there's a whole historical side of this. Depending on when you place this event, at this time the pharaohs, as we think of them, were more like a bunch of kings of a town. They're more area rulers than over an entire nation state, as we kind of think of Egypt today. If that's the case, and I'm not saying it is, but if that's the case, then Potiphar is not just the king or the in charge of an entire nation, right, as far as his role within the government. He's in charge of that city, right? So it makes it maybe a little more reasonable that he would have such dominion, right? But that's neither here nor there. He's put in charge of Potiphar's house. And as he shows himself to be responsible and somebody of character, he gets more and more and more responsibility, to the point that Potiphar looks at Joseph and says, whatever you think, do it. I trust you completely. You run the house. You manage all this. You order what needs ordered. You take care of things. You direct the servants. You make sure that everything's taken care of. I have other things to do. Well, Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph, makes some advancements towards him. Joseph either is oblivious to this or is simply trying to ignore it, until one day she corners him, sends all the guards out, or all the servants out of the house, corners him and says, "Come with me. Let's be intimate together." And Joseph says something very interesting. He says, "How can I sin against the Lord?" So the faith of his father has really blossomed in this environment. And he points first to God and then to the fact of his position. And he says, "I can't do this to my master, your husband. I cannot do this. This is wrong." And she continues to press the issue, and he flees, leaving his coat behind. It's interesting that it started with a coat. He lost his coat. Now, fleeing from the situation, he loses his coat again. And she, of course, then has to cover her tracks, lies about the situation, and gets Joseph in trouble. And he's really lucky to keep his head. Right? You're talking about a pretty powerful guy. Whether you're talking about somebody who's got a high position within the whole nation or simply that city, that state, we're talking about someone who's very powerful. And he turns Joseph over to the jailer, who would be somebody who is directly underneath him, because Potiphar kind of runs the prison system. He runs the security vector of things. And Joseph finds himself at the very bottom as a prisoner in the system. Well, Joseph continues to be faithful, and is faithful with a little, and eventually is faithful with much. And he finds himself in a position where the guard now trusts Joseph in the same way that Potiphar had trusted Joseph. And he really has a lot of sway within this prison, overseeing prisoners, doing different things on behalf of the jailer. So Joseph, once again, is showing himself to be a man of character. Two of the pharaohs guards or workers come in. We have the baker and we have the wine tester. They both get arrested. They both get sent to prison. They both have dreams. Joseph overhears that they've had dreams and says, well, God has given me the ability to understand these. Tell me what's going on and I'll tell you if I can help. So they tell him the dream, and he tells the wine taster, oh, well, you're in 3 days, the grapes that you've squeezed in your dream, that's 3 days, and you're going to be pouring wine for the king again. You're going to be released. You're going to be restored to your position. I haven't been put here rightfully. When you're able to speak to the king on my behalf, please do so that I can get out of here. Seeing that the wine taster has received such a good story, the baker then tells his. How he's got this bread upon his head, these 3 baskets of bread, and the birds come and they're trying to eat the bread off of his head. And Joseph says, well, yours isn't quite as good. In 3 days, 3 baskets, 3 days, you're going to be lifted out of prison and the birds are going to eat you. Because you've sinned against the king. The king is going to find out, and this is the end of your career. And that's what happens. But the gentleman forgets what Joseph has done for him until the king himself has a dream. Now, like I said, in the middle of all of this, we have Judah and Tamar. How am I doing on time here, just so that I can kind of doing pretty good on time. Okay, I'm going to try to do Judah and Tamar. Alyssa did this for her senior woman's talk at Sunset. She looked at this story and did an absolutely fantastic job with it. Judah leaves the family sometime after Joseph is sold into slavery. His father is in mourning and depression. Judah leaves. Judah has 3 sons, and at least 2 of the 3 sons are quite wicked. As a result of this, the oldest son's wife is left a widow. Now, according to levirate marriage, the oldest son is entitled to have a son of offspring in order to carry on his father's name despite his early demise. So Tamar, the oldest brother's wife, is given to the second youngest son to have a child on behalf of his older brother, knowing that this child will be his senior. He chooses not to grant Tamar a child and prevents pregnancy from taking place. God sees this and judges him as well. Both sons lose their life. You're down to 1 son. Judah looks at this and sees a black widow and sends Tamar out of his house back to her father and says, I'll send for you when my son is older. But he has no intention of actually honoring that. Now, we have to understand that a woman, twice married technically now, twice widowed, without children, has no protections in that society. Children are her protection. Children are her provision. By Judah refusing to give his youngest son to Tamar, he is denying her the security of children. She is going to be destitute. Her father doesn't have to take care of her. He is wronging her on so many levels within this system that she lives in. And when she finds out that the youngest son has grown old enough and is not going to be given to her in marriage, that she's not going to receive the opportunity to bear children on behalf of the oldest son and the second oldest son and then this other son, she comes up with a plan. She forces the issue. She dresses up like a harlot, and goes out to where Judah is, and Judah approaches her. She simply dressed the part, wore a veil, made herself present. Judah approaches her. Judah says, let's have intercourse. She says, well, what are you going to give to me for my trouble? What's payment? He says, well, I don't have any money with me, but I have my staff and I have my signet ring. Basically, I have my ID. You can have that. You hold on to that, and I'll send you the money. Okay, that works. Tamar gets pregnant by Judah with twins. She goes back to her father's house. She has the security that she needs in this pregnancy. What is rightfully hers has been given. I know it's all weird to us because this is not the system we're used to. This is not the morality that we're used to, but this is the system set up for her benefit, for her protection. Judah finds out that she is pregnant, knows that it's not by his sons, and he demands that she be brought out and executed for her impropriety. And as she's being dragged out of the house, her father's house, where she should not be, she should be under his roof, under his protection, because she has been brought into Judah's family, she sends the staff and the signet ring that he never was able to receive back because his good friend, who's quite the piece of work as well, went over, tried to find her. All the people in the area said, there hasn't been a shrine prostitute around here in months. I don't know who you're talking about because we haven't seen her. And he says, well, I guess we won't pay her because she's gone. Right? So Judah not only has wronged Tamar in multiple ways, but his friend goes off and makes a fair attempt to pay, doesn't find it, and says, who cares? We'll just let that debt be hanging in the wind and not paid. We don't care. So Tamar sends these important items, basically his ID, and says, the baby are the father who belongs to these. These belong to the daddy. And Judah sees Tamar, or sees these items, his staff, his signet ring, realizes what happened, and says, she's more righteous than me. She's more righteous than I am. Now, I know it all strikes our ears weird, but Tamar has asked for and requested the right that are rightfully hers within that system. Judah should have taken care of her, should have provided for her. Instead, he pushes off his responsibility back to her dad, breaks covenant with her, and then when she breaks social norms, he demands her life. And she then lays down the royal flush and says, you're the one that's at fault here. It wakes him up because he goes back to his dad's house. He goes back to the family. He's going, of all people, Judah is going to become the head tribe. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And when you draw contrast between Judah and Joseph, it's just startling. And through whom will Jesus, the Messiah, come? Judah. It's through Judah. Through Tamar, who has twins. Crazy set of twins again. Well, I mean, all the twin stories, the birth stories, are just horrific in the Bible. My wife can attest to that. She's like, not kosher at all. So Tamar has two sons to replace the two sons judged by God, convicted by God, and killed by God, to replace them within the family. And it is through these twins that David comes. It is through Tamar that the Messiah is going to come. And she is listed in the genealogies of Jesus, one of just several women mentioned. It's an amazing story. And there's a contrast that's being drawn here between Joseph, who, when given the opportunity to do wrong sexually, says absolutely not, and flees and loses his position and suffers for it. And he is constantly gaining morality. He's constantly gaining character. He is growing in his faith. We then have Judah, who is being sexually immoral, not taking care of his daughter-in-law, not taking care of his social responsibilities, who is demanding, while he is at fault for being sexually immoral, he's demanding that his daughter-in-law be perfectly righteous, and being shown to be a hypocrite. Right? I mean, we just have this wonderful, perfect family here in Genesis. It's wonderful. Do not be like this family. The scriptures do not tell us, do not do these things. They expect you to know these are not good things to do. They expect you to have a working brain as you reflect upon the text to go, I cannot believe that God is working with these people. That God is working through them. But that also gives us hope, doesn't it? That God would work in and through us. Now, while all that's going on, because this is sandwiched in between these stories, Joseph gets the opportunity to speak to the king. He receives a dream. He's unable to understand what it means. His wise men hear what the dream is. They're unable to tell what the king what the dream means. And then this cupbearer, this wine tester, goes, Joseph. So Joseph is cleaned up and brought before the king and is told, that Joseph is able to interpret dreams. And Joseph says, I cannot interpret dreams. And the king looks over at the wine bearer and says, I thought you said this was the guy. Right? But what Joseph says is, I'm not able to, but God, who gives the interpretations, is able to tell me the dream, and maybe the Lord will tell me what it is. So the king does. He tells the king what took place. And if you are familiar with your Bibles, this is going to be seen again in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar with Daniel. Basically, the exact same thing is taking place later on. So this is the first time it happens. This time the king actually tells Joseph the dream. And he's got these 7 beautiful heads of grain that grow up, that are then swallowed up by these gnarly, sad, pathetic, dried out, dead heads of grain. But they don't get any better looking. And he wakes up, he's in shock, he's in a wet sweat, or a cold sweat. Goes back to sleep after he's able to calm himself down. Cows, beautiful cows on the bank of the Nile, the lush land, right? And then these 7 gnarly cows that are deprived and almost on the verge of death come out. They consume these plump cows, but don't get any better. The king wakes up in a cold sweat again, just scared out of his mind. He's proclaiming this, and Joseph says, well, this is easy. The 7 heads and the 7 cows are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. There's going to be 7 wonderful years. There's going to be 7 years of famine. If the king is wise, he will appoint somebody to collect during those 7 years of plenty, so that you will have something in the 7 years of want. And as Joseph turns to leave, the king basically says, who among us is as wise and discerning as this man, who not only told me the dream, but told me how to fix it? And Joseph is elevated to second in command over Egypt. Now, we're going to watch a video next week on the historical setting of this within Egyptian history. There is a pharaoh who, instead of being happy and in control, appears worried and has a long face and is very concerned for his people, who seems to be indicating that he suffered a great deal under his reign. he also was the first pharaoh to rise to prominence amongst all these sister state, city-state leaders who were kind of jockeying for position. So this one pharaoh kind of rose to prominence at this point in time. And there's the argument that can be made that this is the pharaoh of the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of want, whom Joseph saved through his plans, as the whole area suffered this horrible plague, this horrible drought, and needed the sustenance. So that is a theory. It's not the only theory there. Go through all of them in the video. I think we'll watch that for our benefit next week. We get through the 7 years of plenty, we get into the 7 years of want. Everybody, not only in Egypt, but also in surrounding areas, coming to Egypt because they have grain. As a result of this, the Bible tells us that the king is selling the grain back to the people. And by, I think it's year 3, they are out of money, they are out of cattle and livestock, and they're out of land. And they eventually just sell themselves. They're like, we are your servants. Like, just keep us alive. It is here that Jacob sends his 10 sons to Egypt because he hears they have grain. It is here that Joseph looks out and sees his brothers bowing down to him. His mind immediately goes back to his dream. He, of course, is in Egyptian getup and nobody recognizes him. And he tests his brothers to see if they've learned a lesson. And it's amazing to see Reuben throw himself and Judah throw themselves to protect their little baby brother, who is also the favorite. Benjamin is the favorite son, the baby of the family, who's eventually has to come. And the brothers, the way that they protect themselves and the way that they're looking to look after their brother and their father, shows they've learned a lesson. They've all matured, which results in Joseph revealing himself as Joseph. There's a wonderful reunion between the brothers. There's then a wonderful reunion between him and his father. They're all brought to the land of Goshen, which is the river delta of Egypt, which is to the north, which is lower Egypt, which is confusing because we think up is down and down is up, but in Egypt it was. When Jacob dies, the brothers will say, oh, Dad said you had to protect us. And he says, I know that Dad didn't say that, but you have nothing to fear from me. Joseph forgives his brothers, takes care of his brothers, and looks after him. Now, what's interesting is technically Joseph died in the family. As a result, while Joseph is still living, Joseph's sons are brought to Jacob. Jacob adopts his 2 grandsons, and they are made tribes in Israel. Right? So if you look back to last week's handout, one of the things you'll see is that Manasseh and Ephraim are on that list because they are adopted in as sons in Joseph's stead, and Joseph becomes the double portion, receives 2 tribes. And Manasseh, which is, I believe, the younger of the 2 sons, receives 2 sections of land in the promised land, because they get to the river Jordan, and they say, this land is good for our livestock, let's stay here. And Moses is going to say, well, you're welcome to stay here, but you have a responsibility to fight with your brothers. So if you're going to stay here, you're going to be the first one across to fight on behalf of your brothers, and then you can come back after the fighting's over. So all of this is connected. All of this is leading up to what will take place 400 or 500 years in the future in the taking of the promised land and the giving of land, the settling of tribes. All of this is setting that stage. So all that's going on. Okay, we've covered a lot of history there. A lot of the complexity. Let's see, I know I'm out of time. Not as much as I thought. Is there any questions or points of clarification? I'd have to go back and look at it, but I would believe that the Joseph mentioned in that genealogy is not this Joseph. That'd be my assumption. But I'd have to go back and look at that. Because Joseph is not in the line of Jesus. Right? He'd be a cousin, but not a brother, or not a direct descendant. Yes. Judah and Joseph were brothers, half brothers, but yes. In the book of Luke, this Joseph shouldn't be listed in the genealogy of Jesus because let me look over there. I'm making an assumption. One of the things I will always tell y'all is if there gets to be a debate or somebody asks questions, go to the text. Right. Joshua, son of Levi. The son of Simeon, the son of Judah. Yeah. Nathaniel, son of David, son of Jesse, son of Obed, son of Boaz. Okay, so where you were at here, because Luke is going in reverse order. So he starts with Jesus and he goes backwards, right? So we have, so what you're looking at here is in verse 30, Simon, son of Judas, son of Joseph, son of, so we go down, Nathan, son of David, son of Jesse, son of Obed, son of Boaz, 33, the sons of Judah, the son of Jacob, 34. So those later folks are descendants after David. So they would be 500s. Right, so there's an, I mean, if you look at Jesus and his father's name is Joseph, right? So there's a number of Josephs in that line, family name being passed along, but he's through the tribe of Judah, right? So, clear as mud. but good catch. You know, when we look at these genealogies, our eyes have a tendency to go cross. You know, but there's a lot of information that's hidden in there. Right, no, it's further down. That's where it's at. Yeah. All right. Well, let's say a prayer. If you have other questions or observations, come let me know, and maybe I can work it in next week's lesson. Sandy's in the hospital. All right. Let's pray. Father, I come before you today. I thank you so much for all that you do. I thank you for your word and for the wisdom that it teaches us and the way that it changes our lives. We ask that you will guide us and mold us. Forgive us when we fall short. Help us to look at these texts and look at these stories and to reflect upon them and to seek to not make the same mistakes as those who've gone before us have. Help us to always strive to to do your will. Please be with those among us who are dealing with illnesses, who are dealing with struggles in their health. We ask that you'd bless them, that you'd help them to be restored to full health and back to us soon. We love you, Father. It's in your Son's name I ask and pray. Amen.